Hey everyone, very, very warm welcome to the e-commerce freedom YouTube channel again. This today, I'm really, really, really excited to welcome Bill Hughes. And today we're going to be talking about how you can increase the value of your company when it comes time to sell. So if you're thinking about starting an Amazon business, or if you've already got one, selling might be something that for you is in the distant future right now, right? It's probably not going to happen for a while. But as I've spoken to quite a few entrepreneurs, even if you're not planning to sell your company, thinking about what to do to make your company more valuable is a great thing to do anyway. So Bill has loads and loads of experience in this area, and he's going to be helping us to think about this stuff from day one. So Bill, it's great to have you here. How are things with you?
Doing well. Yeah. I mean, I think we're all trying to survive the pandemic, and it's given us more opportunities to think about life and what we want to do. So that's been a good thing, even though it's been hard to get out and do some of those things, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. There's so many things I want to do right now. I think because I can't do them, if that makes sense. Like, I really, really want to go on a holiday just because I can't, And I think, yeah, I think a lot of people are in that same boat. But hey, we'll get through this. And unfortunately, e-commerce seems to be absolutely crushing it right now. Like myself, a lot of my clients, we're doing like 80, 90% of the sales we were doing in quarter four in the UK at the moment because the lockdown has just made everyone buy online so much. So, yeah, we're fortunate to be in an industry where this stuff works quite well. So, yeah, I'd love to start, Bill, with your story. So, can you bring us up to speed? Like, how did you get into this industry? And yeah, what experience have you had in this world?
Yeah, great question. I mean, look, I admire a lot of your listeners because I know that many of you out there are are entrepreneurs who have created an idea from scratch and built that. And I'll just be totally upfront. I never have. I have always had the backing of companies to help me develop ideas. And so my background has typically been the liaison between, the money, whether that's like capital companies, investment companies, private equity, and the brands that they're buying. A lot of these are Amazon brands or, startups in the range from 4 to 20 million is typically the size of companies that I'm involved in buying. And so as I've been on several of these acquisitions, I've kind of noticed some themes, and that's what hopefully we'll talk about today, some of those ideas. But most recently, we've done a couple of $20 million acquisitions. Most of those have come, between a 4 and a 5 times valuation. But the brilliant thing that we've been able to do with these, and maybe this is where I've been able to add the most value, is being able to turn these companies very quickly from like a 4 to 5x multiple into like a 10, 11, 12 multiple on the profitability. And I always think I am so grateful for these, young and bright entrepreneurs who brought us their companies, who sold us their companies. But I always think if they had only known when we bought them the things that we were going to do with their company in a short period of time to create that much additional value, if they'd only known that and done that themselves, how much more would they be able to sell for? And I always think, well, if I told them that, then we wouldn't be able to afford them, right? They'd be selling it 10, 11, 12 themselves, and then they'd be out of range because we really like that 4 to 5 multiple. But
So
there
just
are people.
So
Yeah.
this is super important, and just to make sure everybody's on the same page. I know there's going to be some people listening right now that are thinking, I'm not entirely sure what a multiple is. So could you give us like a breakdown of what it means to have a valuation of your company, how that's calculated, and what a multiple, what that means?
Really great question. So, if your target is to do $1 million of revenue, whether that's through Amazon or eBay, and that's not an unrealistic goal. I mean, typically, if you have a good set of like 3 to 4 products and you're selling, up anywhere from 30 to 50 units of that product per day, then that is very realistic to be thinking about $1 million of revenue. At the same time, I think a healthy company at the end of the day, after they pay all of their eBay or Amazon fees or whatever fees you're paying, plus your cost of goods, plus your advertising, anywhere from take home of 30 to 40% margin would be really healthy. Now, I know there's a lot of companies like, kitchen appliances and electronics that they operate on much thinner margins, 15 to 20%, but they're selling a lot more volume too. But that final number is really, really important. In the investing industry, we call that your EBITDA, your earnings before interest taxes, right? And that EBITDA is how your company is measured before sales. So if you're doing $1 million a year and your EBITDA is 300,000, let's just say we're just talking dollars here, $300,000, then when you go to sell the company, most investors will say, okay, that 300,000, we're going to pay you a multiple of that 300,000. Sometimes that's like a 2 times multiple. So they're offering 600,000, a 3 times multiple. They're going to offer you 900,000. Most of the companies that I work with, we pay like a 4 times multiple. That's like, 1.2 million for that $1 million of revenue that you're doing, or that 300,000 in profit. And so that multiple it can go all the way to the top, right? You've heard of companies that have multiples well into the 40s and 50s and 60s because they're doing amazing things. But the majority of companies that sell, that are doing $1 million of revenue, they're kind of hovering around that 3 to 5 multiple, just kind of depending on where they are.
It's a great answer, actually. Yeah, that explained it really clearly. So, um, yeah, like you say, like, I think I heard Google had like I don't know, the multiple keeps changing, but it's very high. So how do you extend the multiple? Like, so if you're an investor, and let's say you're looking to value a company, or you're somebody trying to, create a valuation, how do you like what creates the multiple? Like, from my understanding, it's something to do with how long you realistically think the company's going to last. So a 4 times multiple would be 4 years, a 10 times multiple would be 10 years. Is that basically how it works, or are there other things that we need to think about?
That's a great summary of it. I mean, an investor, looks at, like, if I buy this thing now and if I put very little effort into it, or if things don't work out the way that I thought they did, or maybe the company's so attached to the story of this entrepreneur that when I buy it, it's not going to have that story. What's the minimum that I know that I can make from this to break even? And that's how they think about multiples. So, like, like, for example, an Amazon business that's just strictly Amazon, that has like a pretty steady growth, that typically has like a 3 year shelf life, even without putting a ton more effort into it. If you were to literally just hand the car keys over to the next buyer, that buyer can just keep doing what you're doing for probably 2 to 3 to 4 years, and make the same amount of money. And so again, that's the multiple. If they think it's going to be 2 years and break even on that, they're probably going to offer you a 2x multiple. If they think there's more potential than that, that's where that multiple goes up.
Mm, interesting. So yeah, it's all about potential, and that's, I assume, determined by this how stable the company is. Because if something's falling apart at the seams and any minute could just collapse, then obviously it's not going to have a very big multiple. And this stuff directly affects how much cash is going to be in your pocket as you exit, right? So if you have a 10 times multiple and you're doing, 300K a year profit, then you're going to walk away with what, 3 million, right? As
Yeah.
opposed to, if it was a 2 times multiple, 600K. So this stuff is really, really, really critical to think about if you want to sell. So let's say, we know this now, and we know that, yeah, I want to sell my business. I want to have a strong multiple. What would be, let's say we're at the start of the journey. In fact, actually, let's take a step back. Why would you want to think about this from day one rather than thinking about it 5 years down the line when you're already at, say, a couple million revenue?
Oh, I mean, This is so common. I mean, we get calls. So right now I work for a company where we're kind of consolidating companies within the health and wellness nutrition space, right? And so I get a lot of calls from the major brokerages that are preparing to sell these companies, and they say, "Hey, I've got a friend, John, who's looking to sell his company. He's doing 3 million in revenue this year, 4 million, whatever, but it's all on one channel. I've told him before he sells, he needs to talk to you guys. And so we'll sit down with them and work with them for a year to really diversify their channel strategy. And that alone will increase that multiple. It's well worth the wait." So I always think, man, I hate for companies to get in that position where they're like ready to put the for sale sign up in front of the business, but yet they haven't really thought about how to increase that multiple at sale. They kind of have heard from an early point in the business that it's like, I kind of wish that they would just have this education early on, well before they're thinking about putting the company up for sale.
That makes sense. So let's say someone's selling on Amazon. It would be more beneficial for them to be selling on multiple platforms, right? Because to an investor, I mean, why does an investor not like it if you just sell on one channel? Like what's the problem with that?
Oh, I mean, those of us that are focused on channels know how volatile our channels are, right? You know that at any point eBay could decide to suspend your listing, that Amazon could, for whatever reason, remove half of your reviews and suspend your account. I mean, this just happens all the time, constantly. And so an investor is going to very much like that the brand has stability. Think of it like a tripod, at least a tripod, right? That holds up, a steady pole, right? Has to have at least three legs. We like to think in our industry of, okay, once you've had a little bit of success on Amazon, do you also have like a really good direct to consumer method for selling? Like a really good website with a really good subscriber base for emails. That could be the second leg of the tripod. And then the third leg of that tripod is retail, that everybody just like freaks out at retail. I don't have connections. I don't know anybody. But the reality is, like, retail very much wants to have a piece of your e-commerce success. You've noticed that a lot of the brands that pop up in retail these days are brands you've never even heard of, but they're doing actually pretty well in some particular e-commerce channel. And surprisingly, those buyers of those retail channels very much want to have a conversation with you about your product. Now, you may not get, incredible space. You may only get it if, I'm thinking of like a chain like Boots or something like, over in the UK, you may get a small piece, or in the US, Target, very challenging to get into. You have to think about 7, 8 months ahead because that's when they do their planning for their shelf space. Kroger, another great example. These stores all have buyers who want to have conversations with up and coming brands. They want to help you be a part of that brand building. It's probably not going to be profitable in retail. You're probably going to spend more than you make for sure. But that retail leg of your valuation is so important. It is so stable. It provides so much stability to your brand that it proves to pay for itself very well in the end.
Right. So you're not looking to necessarily get the product into, like you say, Boots or something to make money from the sales. You're looking to do that to show to the investor, look, this thing works on a shelf. We can shift units in a shop. So when you take over the company, well, you could reach out to 10 different retailers and it will sell, right? So the value, that's one way to increase the valuation. Is that right?
That's correct. And another good example is like, like that buyer from Holland and Barrett, right? Find out who they are. Go on to your career building pro, whether that's LinkedIn or what have you. Just make some connections there. Even if you get into just a handful of stores there, or like we were talking about, like Lloyd's Pharmacy or some, that's when the bigger stores will take notice as well. If you're having trouble getting into somebody bigger like Boots or somebody like that, then that's when you would be able to have them take notice, is when you've been able to get into some of those smaller stores for sure.
Interesting. Cool. Yeah. So the earlier we start thinking about all this stuff, the better, right? Because obviously building these relationships takes time. Um, and yeah, it takes a while. So, yeah, I'm curious. Do you have any examples of companies that you've been through this process with, or companies that you thought you saw them and you were like, wow, you really have missed opportunities here?
Yeah, I do. We certainly do. One of the companies that we were able to partner with very early on back in 2018 was New You Nutrition. And New You is a company, they're out of the UK, and they were kind of like close to that 20 million pound mark per year.
Wow.
And, but they were primarily Amazon, and some eBay. And so their valuation, their multiple, was somewhere between 4 and 5 on the revenue. So immediately after the partnership and the purchase, and I say partnership because we always try and purchase and incentivize the owners to stay on for at least a period of time. I mean, typically like 2 to 3 years is ideal for an investor. They like that stability. So, like, just like be thinking about that when you go to sell, like you're kind of just at the halfway point. I mean, you're definitely going to get to the finish line, but you're going to do so much better if you can let the investor know that you're going to be part of that transaction through the end. So the former owners of that company have continued to stay with it and have helped grow it, and have helped grow it significantly into retail and multiple channels. And that's important. Of course, we have a big, in the US, we have a big distributor of wellness products called iHerb, and one of their strengths is being able to ship internationally, like very quickly, products that you otherwise wouldn't be able to buy in stores, just because those products get caught up in customs and things like that so much. So iHerb has figured out how to get around that. And just by doing that, again, that company now is probably poised for about a 10x multiple. Even though the revenue hasn't grown significantly, the revenue's probably grown another maybe 30-40% on that brand. But the valuation is so much greater because of that diversification.
Right. So is that diversification just so they just went to more channels then, basically?
Correct. I mean, your buyer is really a strategic partner. And when you, as much as you want somebody to buy the brand, a good strategic partner who buys the brand might have some expertise in areas like retail or different channels, or have a lot of connections in different areas. And that's important because, again, even most of the transactions, you'll still hold on to some of that ownership, and then that ownership becomes very important as your strategic partner continues to grow your brand in these other channels. In many cases, that portion of the ownership that you hold on to can sometimes be just as valuable as the original purchase price that the owner paid for the brand, or that the strategic partner paid for the brand. And so we like to look for those opportunities with brands to, like, say, hey, look, we know you're not ready to sell yet. You're probably not even thinking about it, but like, let's join forces early on, because here's how it's going to be beneficial through the entire journey for you.
Right. So even when they're not ready to sell, it's good to be thinking about selling and contacting people to get help with the selling. So yeah, let's talk more about that. So why would you start talking to someone who might buy your company before it's even ready to actually sell?
That's a great point. And that's just as important as thinking about the customers who you're selling your product to, is to think about the bigger picture of, who do you really want this company to go to? Like, who makes the most sense? And if it makes sense for you to think about selling to them, it's probably makes sense for them to think about buying you. It really does work that way. And you can kind of pick and choose your strategic partner very early on. Even partners that you may not think are even in the business of buying companies like yours, they will be interested if they see that there's an opportunity at the end. And so picking that strategic partner early on, you're thinking about what are the resources that they can offer me. I know that group has, a sales force that actually is like out on the ground, like knocking on retailers' doors, or they have like an expert who can get me into some club wholesale, division, or they have a network of distributors that makes a lot of sense for my brand. And to like really court those relationships early on. Now, right now in the pandemic, we're not going to trade shows. We're not going to a lot of events where the people are. So it's a little more challenging. But as soon as things open up, those trade shows are a fantastic opportunity. Sometimes it's really hard to make those connections online, and it's really hard. They're getting constantly bombarded. But to get in front of these people's faces and just like introduce yourself early on in your brand, talking about your brand and why you like a potential strategic partnership makes a lot of sense for these guys.
Interesting. For that was going to be my next question is, let's say you wanted to find a strategic partner and you wanted to find someone who could buy your business in the future, where would you go? So is trade shows really the best place? And how would you start the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, trade shows is a great place because typically you get the C-level executives at those shows because they are there for most of the reasons that they're there are shopping for companies. That's how companies grow these days. I mean, there is organic growth, but anybody who has, the financial ability to grow a major company, or a good line of credit is going to be at those shows shopping for customers. So you're going to get a very broad group of executives there. You'll get a lot of salespeople there. You'll get kind of the best of the best of the company. I think gone are the days where companies, kind of like hire out their trade show staff and you go and you walk to this generic booth with like a bunch of like great looking people, but they know nothing about the business which they're talking about. Those days are kind of over. And I think everybody realizes that trade shows are not just for selling your product, but are really opportunities for shopping around for other businesses. So the approach is just very much just like dedicate that time, like be specific, choose the companies that you want to go after. You can look at the trade show list and see who's going to be just presenting. That's easy. That's the easy part. Literally just going online, looking at who's exhibiting, what booth they're in, and then the size of their booth sometimes makes a big difference. Like if they have a pretty large booth, you can probably expect that the executive team is going to be there. If it's just a small booth down in the news section, maybe they're just sending, their business development team. But you kind of get that idea. Pick the handful that you want to be a part of and just be present. Just be present, introduce yourself and let them know why you're there. And the right time will come, where you'll get that appointment to meet with the right person.
Interesting. So what we're talking about here usually is bigger companies who want to acquire your business to help their company grow. Is that what? So it's almost like when Tony Hsieh sold his company to Amazon, right? That's usually what happens when you sell your business. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. I mean, nobody likes to just hand over the money and hope that things continue as they are. And so the new model is very much strategic partnership. And even private equity is realizing that. So, what private equity will sometimes do is become very niche focused and they'll purchase like a major company that then can have a bunch of smaller purchases as strategic partners. So, for example, the company that I work with right now is called Grove. And we have about 20 of our own brands, but also partner brands. And the way that we attract these partners, they're primarily in the nutrition and wellness space, is, we look for them when they're at their, maybe $3 to $5 million revenue mark. And we say, okay, look, we know that you guys are headed towards a sale. And right now, at best, like realistically, let's talk valuation. And we talk about that valuation and they know that range is pretty much capped out somewhere, 4 or 5 or something like that. But by partnering with us, like immediately, because we're able to have so many synergies and so much diversification with multiple brands in our portfolio, that immediately by partnering with us, their level of partnership, whatever amount that they've paid into or received, is worth almost double, because they're going with a strategic partner who's primarily focused on growing this industry with their brands. And there's several companies like us. Like, one of the models that I look to as well, a company similar to the one that I work for, is called Thrasio. And we've talked a lot about Thrasio in the past and what they've been able to accomplish. I mean, their revenue from 60 or 70 or 80 or 100 Amazon brands that they now own, they're like poised towards this 20x multiple on those. That's how big that is. Now, can you imagine being an Amazon brand who at best could maybe get 4 or 5, and then partnering with somebody like Thrasio, who's all of a sudden your brand is worth 20x, and you're like, dang, I wish I would have held on to more of my brand. That's what you're thinking when you partner with those guys. But it's the same thing with our model. Right now, we're at about a 12x. So people that partner with us, they immediately kind of come on board at a 12. And so be thinking about those partners, like, what are their current valuations? And if I partner with them, will my valuation will my multiple and valuation immediately fall into their multiple and valuation? The answer a lot of times is yes.
Interesting. Cool. All right. So we need to we need to be thinking about this stuff early on, like you said. So let's say we've got a product or maybe a line of products that's really starting to blow up, right? We're seeing some success with it. Obviously, most entrepreneurs, their instinct would be like, okay, right, I'm making some money. I want to make more money with this product. And they just think, okay, well, I just want to keep growing the business. I want to get more stock in. I want to increase my profit. Um, but when it comes to thinking about selling, obviously that's not always the best approach. So let's say a product starts to catch fire. What would you do next?
Your first inclination upon that success, your is, I need to produce more units, and I need to grow this channel that I'm on. And I would just say, like, take a step back from committing to spend that valuable revenue on more inventory. Take a step back and keep your entrepreneurial hat on before you put your supply chain hat on. Keep your entrepreneurial hat on and figure out, how can you replicate that success in other marketplaces? Where else? So, for example, yeah, I mean, you've got like a really successful Facebook funnel that's producing high amount of sales on direct to consumer. Is that possible to look at a category in Amazon where you could have that similar success, or even Alibaba? As you know, Alibaba is no longer just for B2B sourcing. Alibaba is now becoming a major force in business to consumer sales and even direct to consumer sales. And so, as a brand, what are these other channels that you can diversify on? What connections can you start building in retail right away? Start studying retail. What are they doing to get those end caps? What does it take to get in the store? What are the documents that I need from my supplier, so that when I go have that conversation, that my supplier is not going to just kick me out the door for another 6 months while I gather those documents? Those are all really important things to think about. And then, the second issue is, can your supplier keep up with you? Even though you are paying a higher price, at some point when you are ready to order those 10,000 units instead of 3,000, will they be able to keep up with you? And that's always very challenging, because a lot, and especially in the food space, we see this all the time, like gourmet grocery items. A lot of the food manufacturers and suppliers, they're just not equipped to do thousands and thousands of products a day. They're a lot of times built for small scale batches and things like that. So, you know, do I need to be thinking about another supplier? Possibly.
Makes sense. Absolutely. Yeah. So thinking about um, yeah, making sure you have the capacity to expand to all these channels long term. as well. Cool. All right. So, I mean, we've covered a lot of ground. I think this has given people a lot of food for thought. I mean, any final things or things you think we missed out when people are looking to sell and things they need to think about?
Yeah, I mean, just remember that you have been successful building something, and chances are really good that you can do it again. And even if you've experienced failures and had some success, you've got it within your DNA to do this again. And that's why it's so important, even at the minute that you have any success in your business, to be thinking immediately about selling the business, because the sale of the business truly starts from day one of your success. And you know that that's a long process, that again, the halfway mark is when you sell it, because the true multiple is going to come from you staying on with the new investor for a period of time. Once that period is over, your non-compete paperwork is all expired, you're okay to move on to something else, then you can move on to the next thing. Now hopefully in your mind you've already got the next idea ready to go, queued up, ready to move on it, so that you're not having to violate your agreements with your current buyer. But that is the beauty of this method, is just like, find the success, be thinking about the sale, look for the new opportunity, find that success, grow it, be thinking about the sale. A great entrepreneur probably can pull this off 4 or 5 times and make a ton of money. Think about it. If you're selling these brands, if you're just able to grow these brands to 3 to 4 million, even 5 million, and you're doing this multiple times in your life, and you're selling each of these for anywhere between 10 and 20 million, you're easily going to walk away with $100 million worth of valued businesses that you've created in your lifetime. And of course, investing that into new businesses and supporting younger, newer entrepreneurs, that's the socially responsible thing to do. That is the best thing that you can do with that money that you've made, is reinvest it into new entrepreneurial ideas. And you will make your money multiple times over again. It's a great method. We see it all the time. A lot of the people that approach us, we've already bought their first company. They're here on their second company. So we trust them. We believe them. It gets so much easier the second time to sell that company.
So exciting, man. It's really cool that we've covered a lot of stuff that's more high level. And like I said, a few steps ahead of what a lot of people will be thinking about, when they're looking for their first product. And yeah, it's just so good to think about this now because, like you say, yeah, you could do this multiple times if you're thinking about the sale of the business once you start to see that first bit of success. Not leaving it until you already have several million in revenue. So, Bill, it's been really really valuable. I'm sure there's some people out there thinking, maybe I have a successful product, or maybe I want to sell my company at some point. So, how can you help? How can they reach out to you, and where can they find you?
That's great. Thanks for inspiring that seed with people. I love to talk to young up and coming Amazon brands, especially in like kind of the health and wellness space, but we cover all of those brands. So if you've got a product that you think is going to have some success on Amazon, or you have a competitor that you're looking at and you know that you can do better, you've got a better supply chain, come talk to me. Like, we can help you very early on. And by the way, we're very big on helping you keep as much of the business throughout the process as possible. So I'm never going to take over your Amazon account. I'm just going to be a very much a partner investor in that. If you've got a company that is in the wellness space, possibly, that's you're thinking about selling, and it makes sense for you, you're kind of early in that process, like, come talk to me as well. I'd love to just be able to talk to you about what that partnership looks like and what we could do together. I think it would make a lot of sense. You can look at grove.com, growve.com, or the agency portion of my business is Zonlux Digital, ZONLUXDIGITAL.com. And that's the Amazon and marketplaces portion of the business. So anybody who would like to have a conversation, I'd love to talk to you on the phone. Let's just go through and talk about what we can do to work together.
It's very generous. Awesome. All right, Bill. Well, thanks so much for your time today. I think we really covered a lot of ground, and it's been really, really valuable. Um, and yeah, really can't hope you get some good connections from this interview from my audience. Anyone who's interested, and yeah, I'd love to have you on again sometime.